What's going on, everybody? This is Black Men Sundays. I'm your host, Corey Sylvester Murray, and we're talking about generational wealth, finance, business, and of course, mental health.
It's a Black Man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away. I refuse to be the man I was yesterday. Gotta put my best foot forward and elevate.
So, you live in your dream house, you marry your dream wife, your kids never lived any different outside of your dream home. How do you expose them to life not as fortunate as to what you were able to provide? And do you prefer private or public schools for your kids? We speak to my brother Kalali Dogbe. His brother has a master's in public policy from Norfolk State University. He's a world traveler, family man, and his family's from Ghana, who taught him about generational wealth at an early age. I know him personally. His father also was a professor at Norfolk State University. So without further ado, my brother Kayla Dogby, welcome back to Black Men Sundays, brother. Even though you're here every week, let's have this conversation, man.
The house I live in right now is my dream house. Like I don't mind paying the mortgage every month because it's the house I want to live in, and I love this house, and I love the community we live in, and I love our lifestyle. But I don't have to live here, And if I didn't live here, would I still be aspiring to this as like, what I think success is, where I could be basically successful doing exactly whatever it is that I'm doing, but we always comparing ourselves to some other idea of success.
You said you living in your dream house. And, I've known you for a long time. You probably one of the first friends that I've ever had that actually lived in a house that looked
Word.
like me. You know what I'm saying? So for me to hang out, being around, your mother, your father, your brother, he was young, your sister, even your youngest sister was a baby at the time, Della. So it was cool
Yeah, yeah,
seeing that. But I guess my
yeah.
question for you is like you said, you're living in your dream home.
Right.
How do you translate that to your kids that say, okay, well, I was
That's the
raised
hard
like
part.
this. How do you drive them through a neighborhood that may have looked, not the best neighborhood, not the best community, not the best anything going on there? How do you translate that to your kids who basically benefit off you and your wife's hard work, your success? I mean, you have a master's in public policy, so you're not a slouch. But how do you translate
Appreciate
that to your kids so that they don't take it, they don't take the lifestyle, they don't take you and your wife for granted? How do you translate that? Because some people, you see the kids raise themselves, the mom and the dad, they in a club hanging out, they spending money on themselves. The kids got snotty noses. So how do you translate that to your kids to where it really affects them to say you're living better than the average person?
that's the question that everybody's trying to figure out how to answer, because like coming from where we come from now, I'm not going to front and act like I came from poverty, because I didn't come from poverty. You know what I'm saying? Now, when I started out, so before I turned 16, I lived in an area of Hampton called Buckrow, Hampton, Virginia, called Buckrow. That area is not known as like an area where rich people live. You know what I'm saying? So I lived in like a working class neighborhood, and I had friends and stuff who were dealing with like some real poverty issues, but I don't, that wasn't necessarily my story. You know what I'm saying? Even though we were in the working class neighborhood, I saw it, but I wasn't, that wasn't my experience. It was the only thing I can say is it was my experience tangentially through them. You know what I mean? So that like experience, and just the experience I had coming up, like, when I turned 16, I had to go get a job. I couldn't just like, my parents had money, so they gave me money, cars, da da da, this, that, and the third. I didn't have that. You know what I'm saying? So there was a certain amount of like, if you want something, you have to go out and get it. Like, it's not gonna just come to you, you know. And the struggle with raising kids who, let's just go ahead and say are well off, like, is how do you teach them that like this is not, like, this isn't guaranteed. Like, mom and dad fight every day for this. Maybe I should start driving them, through neighborhoods where things is rough. What we try to do is first of all, we try to put them in church so that they have a good moral foundation. Like, we try to put them in church because I mean, the moral foundation to me is the start of everything. If somebody doesn't have a good moral foundation, it doesn't matter what they do. So we try to have them have a good moral foundation, and within that moral foundation, we're able to put them in positions where they can actually be of assistance to the community. So I think it's more of a teaching how to be of service. That yes, you guys have a lot. Everybody doesn't have what you have, and your purpose is to serve as much as possible. So, whether that be being part of like what we call a move ministry at church, where we give out food to people who need it, or teaching generosity, or teaching how to take care, how to think about how to be empathetic and sympathetic to the plights of people who don't have the same perspective as you, or who aren't in the same class as you, or who don't have the same resources as you. I think that's kind of the road that we're on right now with my kids, is like trying to instill those values. But it's difficult because they just have a different value system, like, or I won't say a different value system, but they have a different idea of what like a baseline necessity is. It's like, nah, you don't need $100 or whatever dollar dress to like celebrate Easter. You know what I'm saying? But you think you do because that's what you've been given your whole life. Or you don't need new clothes, or you don't need, but they think they do because that's what they've been given all of their life. Or that's just the standard of living that we're at. So I don't know. So I mean, I hope that answers the question to some degree, but it's an ongoing question. And most people I talk to who are in the same position are asking themselves the same question, because you don't want, especially, this Black Men Sunday, so you might as well get down to it, especially if we're talking about Black children, because the world isn't going to give you much of anything, really. It doesn't matter how much money you have. At some level, you're not going to be able to just go off of what your name is, or who you or who you're known by, or whatever the case might be. And so, and even a bigger dimension of that is, okay, let's say you have all of that, but if the political structures or the cultural structures are working against you, how are you going to be able to maintain it? So it's also since you got all these resources, take some time and be wise about how society is structured and what you can do to make the world a better place.
Great information. Let me ask you this though: when we're talking about, because you have a son and you have a daughter, and I know they're different ages, but do you see a difference in, like, does your daughter understand the differences versus your son, or is it really just the same in just how you're raising them?
Okay, so this is a good question. It's a really good question. So we're also dealing with a situation where you have to treat boys and girls differently. And there's been studies done on this, so I'm not saying anything that's not founded. There's been studies done on this. The structure of schools, particularly, what is this, 2026, particularly in the last 40 years, are not a structure that favors boys. And that is not, so let's not get it twisted. That's not the fault of women. Because a lot of times when people say that, then people try to make it like it's the fault of women. That's the fault of us as men in a structure that's driven by men, deciding that educating children is a woman's job. You know what I mean? So, okay, if you're going to say that that's a woman's job, and men are going to go into, hard science fields like engineering, or going to being doctors, or even going into more blue collar fields, like getting a trade or whatever the case might be, and you're going to leave education out of the equation because that's a woman's job, well, then guess what? The school system and the educational structure, even though at the very top levels is still led by men, at all the other levels where education is actually being implemented is going to be led and implemented by women, which means that the culture of the school is going to favor the culture, especially of the public school system, is going to favor women. What that means is that as women have started to get more equal opportunity, because obviously there was a time when women couldn't even get an education in this country, but now that they've started to get more equal opportunity to get an education, with the education system also favoring them. And I'll give you one quick example. One example of this that's shown in like behavioral sciences is boys, of a certain age cannot learn immediately. What that means is that they need a workout. You need recess at the beginning of school. Like if you want to teach a boy, You need recess at the beginning of school so they can run around for like an hour. You know what I mean? Get all that energy out. Then they're better able to learn, right? Because now they've gotten all that spastic energy out. Now they're better able to learn. Whereas girls, because they mature faster, girls are able to sit down and learn immediately. So if you're doing a school system where you start 8 o'clock or whatever it is right at the bell and you expect it to be a structured classroom, then that's going to be a classroom that's going to favor, the girls will excel in that and boys will act up. And then when the boys act up, especially the black boys, what happens? We get put on, behavioral type things. All of a sudden they talking about your child is ADD or your child is ADHD. And I'm not disparaging any actual diagnosis of that, but sometimes that's overdiagnosed. And then they start giving you drugs. They start giving your kid drugs, and now your kid is on drugs. Maybe that kid didn't need drugs. Maybe it's just a boy who wasn't able to get his energy out before he was able to sit down and learn. And I'm saying all that to say, these are the kinds of things that, like, when you have time to think, you sit back and think about. So then how am I going to raise my kids to see differently? So our daughter, I got a 9-year-old daughter. She's actually in public school because she has a personality type. She can handle that. My son, on the other hand, is in private school. And so they're actually getting different teaching. So what does that mean? They're actually also getting to interact with different types of people. So my daughter's getting to interact with a lot wider, diverse group of people. And so because she's getting the chance to interact with a lot of more diverse groups of people in terms of class, in terms of background, in terms of, the houses they come from, experiences they have, I would say she has a wider understanding of different perspectives of, if you got money, if you don't got money, what that might mean for you. And so we have those kind of conversations. She's also had, unfortunately, some much tougher experiences because, in the public school system, we all came through the public system. There's bullying in the public school system. And so those things are in the public school system. Whereas my son really hasn't had those kinds of experiences, partially because we kind of have, I would say, we chose to shield him from those experiences because we know for a boy that's going to be more destructive. Now, that being said, he has a broader educational base because he's in the private school system. And so I would say my daughter has more practical knowledge of like different perspectives and different experiences, whereas my son has more of an intellectual understanding of it. And so we have different conversations with them based on that. That's the best way I can answer that question.
So many brothers now is like, you know what? My wife does great. I do great. We're in our dream house. Should I put my kids in public school or should I leave them in public school? Because a lot of my friends are dropping their kids off to these private schools. And I do notice the experiences are different. But I'm saying from your point of view, and you have a wife that's a principal, so you definitely have an advantage. What would you say are the outside of the paying? Because I hear the private schools is damn near like paying a college tuition. Outside of the finances, because a lot of brothers ask me, should I send my kids to private school? But me and the wife, we living in our dream house. We didn't go to no private school. So from your point of view, what advantages is private school versus the advantages of public school? And then reverse both of them.
Man, so again, you hitting on some hardcore questions because these are the kind of conversations me and my wife have at least once a week. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, should we pull our daughter out of public school and put her in private school? How's that going to impact our finances? Can we handle the bill? Will she really thrive in a private school setting more than a public school setting? What about my son? Maybe we should pull him out of private school and put him in public school. So first, you have to know your kid. Our son is in a Montessori school. The Montessori education is a little bit different than just any private education or any education in general. So that's a whole different thing. Now, he has the type of disposition where he actually can work with that very well with the private school education. Whereas my daughter at this point, she probably needs a little bit more of the structure of a public education system. So and that's what I'll say. Like with a private school, you're gonna get more experiences. You're definitely going to get more experiences. You're going to get smaller classrooms, which is really important because it means that the teachers have more ability to have more one-on-one time with the kids, and kids learn better in smaller settings. It's harder to deal with like unique situations, or it's harder to tailor the education to a particular kid when you have a 30 kid classroom. Like, you're basically like, this is the curriculum. We have a general approach to this curriculum. Every kid needs to hit this mark by this particular time. And if they're not hitting that mark, then there's a limited number of remedies to deal with them. Whereas in a private school, yeah, you got to hit the same marks as far as education, but the curriculum might be a little bit more flexible, or the approach might be a little bit more flexible, and you might be able to tweak that approach to tailor to your kid, or to the individual kid. Now, on the flip side, and this is the part that I think is underrepresented when it comes to education. When you talk about charter schools, private schools, they are selective. So what does that mean? That means that they get to pick who gets into their school. If you got a kid that's on a SPED program, or you got a kid that needs extra educational assistance, unfortunately, the private schools are not really going to be wanting to select you, because their whole thing is, how can we keep our education numbers up? How can they're not interested in catering to, a kid with a learning disability, let's say. They're not necessarily going to do that. So again, if you have means, now your kid's got a learning disability. If your kid has a learning disability, then maybe you can get additional help outside. You get a tutor, or you can get additional therapy outside of the charter school or outside of the private school, to keep so that your kid stays on grade level with everybody else and gets all the things they got. But the private school is not necessarily going to be interested in doing that. But if your kid is a high achieving kid, what they will be interested in doing is optimizing the experiences of that kid and the talents of that kid, and making sure that that kid, is a great critical thinker. I'll put it that way. That's what a private school can do. So a lot of people disparage the public school system because the public school system has lower marks, but you always got to keep in mind the public school system is dealing with every kid. No, you can't turn away a kid from public school. So they have more avenues to deal with, like a kid with a learning disability, or a kid, that may have some behavioral issues, or a kid that, just needs some extra attention, or maybe learns in a different way. It's basically weighing it off. It's like, okay, if you're, on the one hand, in the public school system, you're dealing with everybody. If you don't want, let's keep it 100. If you don't want your kid to deal with everybody, then that's not, because it's going to be 30 kids in the classroom. It's going to be a lot of different perspectives. It's going to be a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of things going on. But they'll also have some government services available for you. You go to the private school or the charter school system, and it all depends too on which school you go to, what educational method they teach. But in general, when you go to the private school system, it's going to be high demanding curriculum and smaller classrooms. That's like the basis of it. Private school is like college tuition. I mean, if private school is expensive. Education is expensive, which is something that we in this country need to talk about. There's two costs we need to talk about, which is medical care is through the roof, and education is through the roof. Like, education expenses are incredible. Like, and so it's like, yeah, you will be paying like it's a college tuition. And so this comes down to like choices about where you live. You got to think about where you live. For instance, I live in Calvert County, Maryland. Calvert County, Maryland has one of the better educational systems. Like, our kids don't, like, even my son doesn't really need to go to private school in Calvert County, because Calvert County has a great educational system, you know. But you might be in the area where the public school system isn't that great. And then there's, again, things that you can do about that, but it takes time. So over a long period of time, you can change the quality of your public school system if you understand how the system works. Civic literacy and financial literacy are the two things that they don't teach in school, but are the two most important things in your life. How does the system work? Most public education is funded by property taxes. So if the property taxes are high in your area, you live in an affluent area, then your public education system is probably going to be good. If you live in a low income area, public education system is probably not going to be as good. But you also have to watch what your local government is doing with those tax dollars. At my church, Calvert County Baptist Church, I also teach a financial literacy class. And one of the things that's in the financial literacy class that we go over is, what kind of money conversations did you have with your kids when they were coming up, when they were 10, when they were 8, 15, coming up, and then coming up to their teens? What kind of money conversations did you have with them? Because again, just like we talked about before, like for me, if I'm not having money conversations with my kids in the next few years coming up, they're not going to understand what to do with money. So when you say, hey, go chase your dreams, look, daddy done did it for you, or daddy and mommy done did it for you, so all you got to do is go chase your dreams. Okay, they go chase their dreams, they earn money, but the problem is they don't know what the point of money is. They don't know how to use money as a tool. And so that's what I find with most folks. Like, they focus on generational wealth, but we don't focus on generational knowledge. You know what I'm saying? We don't focus on generational financial literacy. Like the knowledge, like remember back in the days, we from around the way, you know what I'm saying? We listen to hip hop music, you know what I'm saying? What did we learn in hip hop music is knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. The money is not, they talk about money, power, respect, but the money is not the power. You know what I'm saying? Unless you know how to use it properly. It's the knowledge that's the power. You know what I'm saying? So it's like what we focused on, and I have a conversation. One of my colleagues, I was having a conversation with her, and she is focused on generational wealth so much to the point that it's like, okay, but your kids don't know how to use money. Your kids don't know how to manage money. You have financial literacy, but do your kids have financial literacy? Because if your kids have financial literacy, then it doesn't matter what they do with the assets you leave to them. You're going to leave to them all kinds of assets. You might leave to them a house. You might leave to them stocks. You might leave to them just money in the savings account. You might leave it, you're going to leave different things to them. Now, in their position, you got to entrust to them, hey, if you're financially literate, then you'll know what to do with that money in your position. So yeah, maybe they don't keep the house. Maybe they sell the house. But they sell the house to do what with it? Sell the house to invest it in something where they think they're going to make more money back, or sell the house to build a business of their own where they can build and grow more, or sell the house to, to do something else that's going to allow their money to make more money for it. Maybe they invest in another country or something like that. Now, that is generational wealth. Generational wealth is about the knowledge, because times don't change, don't stay the same. So at some point, the methods we're teaching, or the methods that all of our guests have taught us throughout the years we've been doing this, have always been the same. Invest in stock, invest in real estate, make sure you have a good savings. You can save 3 to 6 months. Those methods never change. So, but what does change is the person you're applying it to and the position they might be in. So if somebody gifts me with a house today, it might not be on me to be like, oh, I'm gonna maintain that house. Maybe that's not what I'm gonna do. Maybe I will sell the house. But the financial literacy that they have pushed into me or pushed me to or taught me from years and years from before, that's what's gonna tell me, okay, let me take this money I got from this house. Maybe I'm gonna buy a property somewhere else, or I'm gonna buy a business, or I'm gonna start my own business, or I'm gonna look at Africa, or I'm gonna look at South America, or I'm looking somewhere like that, and I'm gonna invest money over there, and help to build that up, so that money continues to come back to me, so that the money makes money. So I think sometimes we focus on, as saying we're doing generational wealth. We focus on, I built this business, I built this house, I own these houses, and my kids need to be exactly like me, and they need to build a business, and they need not build the business, they need to maintain the business. They need to keep these same exact houses and rent them out and make the same money I'm making and do this and that. And that might not be what they want to do, and that might not even be what they should do. But if they have the knowledge, then they will be able to understand how they can maneuver to make whatever dreams they want to make come true. And I'll leave it on that point, like, because to me, that's what the point of money is. The point of money is to get free, is to get economic freedom, so that you could do whatever it is you want to do to the highest level you want to do it to, without ever having to worry about making compromised decisions because you got bills to pay. And so if we, ultimately, that's like, to me, that's my life's goal. Like, I'm still in the struggle. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like we talked about, like I got my dream house and this and that, but I'm still in the struggle because I still got bills to pay. My goal is to not have bills to pay, or if I do have bills to pay, they be of such little consequence to me that it doesn't determine what I do with the rest of my time.
Oh yeah, we're gonna wrap that up right there, my brother, because I feel like so many people, when they talk about wealth building, when they talk about strategies with their financial advisors, with their accountants,
Yeah.
that's the end goal. And me working in the news for 25 years, we've gone to people's houses where they're retired. And then, you might see a sister with a bonnet. I'm like, it's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. You still got a bonnet on your head? You got your pajamas on? Like, they at grandma's house, and grandma's is crying to us on the news saying she may have to go back to work.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the end goal is freedom. The end goal is to have as much of your time free as possible to do with whatever you want to do with it, because the time is what we don't get back. That's the end goal. The end goal is not to compile a whole bunch of money, because we can all get 3, 4, 5 jobs and compile a bunch of money, but we spend all our time working at those jobs. So the thing is, make your money work for you, and then you don't, and you know what I'm saying, and then you don't have to work, and then because you don't have to work, yeah, I mean, that actually, and I'm borrowing some of this from I told you I was looking at TD Jake's podcast, so I'm borrowing some of this from his podcast. You know what I'm saying? Where they were talking about, it's like, when you buy back your time, when you free, you get your time free, then you can focus on the things that's really important, like becoming a better human being, becoming a better father to your children, becoming a better husband to your wife. You know what I'm saying? Giving back to your community, being involved in the community, you know what I'm saying? So you improve the politics and the economy of your community. That's what the end goal is. The end goal isn't just to have a whole bunch of money and sit on it and pass it to the next generation. And again, if we're not educating the next generation, what does it matter anyway? Yeah, they're gonna blow it.
It's a black man Sunday. Time to put all childish things away.